You want to know what your little joke just cost you?
The crystal wine glass exploded against the marble floor like a gunshot. Every conversation in that opulent ballroom stopped mid-sentence. 500 of the world's most powerful people turned to stare. The orchestra's violins fell silent. Even the servers holding million-dollar champagne bottles froze in place. Standing at the center of it all was a black woman in a flowing emerald gown. Her hand was still raised from where she'd hurled the glass. Her dark eyes blazed with the kind of fury that could burn down empires. You want to know what your little joke just cost you? Her voice cut through the silence like a blade through silk. The billionaire family standing before her had no idea they were about to lose everything they'd spent generations building. What happened next would send shockwaves through Wall Street and change the face of American business forever. That shattered glass represented more than broken crystal. It represented the moment when old money met new power. When inherited privilege collided with earned excellence. When centuries of systemic oppression finally met its match in the form of one brilliant woman who refused to bow. This is the story of Dr. Sophia Washington. A name that should be carved into the history books, but somehow remains whispered only in boardrooms and business schools. She wasn't supposed to be in that ballroom. She wasn't supposed to have that kind of power. And she definitely wasn't supposed to fight back the way she did. But fight back she did. And when the smoke cleared, one of America's oldest and most powerful business dynasties would never recover. The setting was a sprawling estate in the Hamptons. The kind of place where presidents once vacationed and where billion-dollar deals were made over afternoon tea. The occasion was the annual charity gala of one of America's most exclusive foundations. Sophia had worked 20 years to earn an invitation to this gathering. 20 years of building her empire from nothing. 20 years of proving herself in rooms where she was the only face that looked like hers. She'd climbed every mountain they put in her path. She'd broken through every glass ceiling they claimed didn't exist. She'd turned their own game against them and won spectacularly. But what happened that night would prove that sometimes the biggest victories require walking away from everything you thought you wanted. The family at the center of this storm had been American royalty for over a century. Banking, oil, steel, real estate. Their tentacles reached into every corner of the economy. Their name opened doors that remained locked to everyone else. But their empire was crumbling. The old ways of making money were dying. They needed innovation. They needed technology. They needed the future. Most of all, they needed Sophia Washington. They just didn't know how to ask without revealing how desperately they needed her. So instead, they made the mistake that would destroy them. They forgot that power earned is always stronger than power inherited. Let me tell you about the woman who would bring down an empire. Sophia Washington was born in South Central Los Angeles. Her mother cleaned houses for wealthy families in Beverly Hills. Her father worked double shifts at a factory that made parts for luxury cars he'd never be able to afford. Every morning before school, little Sophia would ride with her mother to those mansions in the hills. While her mother scrubbed toilets and washed dishes, Sophia would sit in those grand libraries, reading books about business and economics and dreaming of a world where she wouldn't have to watch her mother's hands bleed from industrial cleaning chemicals. Her mother, Rosa Washington, had dreams of her own. Dreams that had been deferred by poverty and circumstance and the weight of raising a daughter alone after Sophia's father died in an industrial accident when she was 12. "Baby girl," her mother would say while counting tip money at the kitchen table. "You study those rich folks good. Learn how they think. Learn how they move their money. Because one day, you're going to have money of your own. And when you do, you're going to remember where you came from." Those words became Sophia's North Star. She graduated valedictorian from high school despite working part-time jobs to help pay rent. Full academic scholarship to Stanford. Computer science and business double major. Graduated summa cum laude, while most of her classmates were still figuring out what they wanted to do with their lives. But having credentials and getting opportunities were two different battles entirely. Her first job was at a prestigious tech consulting firm in Silicon Valley. She was the only black woman in a company of 300 employees. She watched mediocre men get promoted over her quarter after quarter. She sat in meetings where her revolutionary ideas were dismissed, only to see them implemented months later by white colleagues who suddenly claimed to have invented them. The microaggressions came daily like paper cuts. "You're so articulate. Where did you really go to school? Are you here because of affirmative action?" Each comment designed to make her question whether she belonged, whether she'd earned her place, whether she was good enough. But Sophia had learned something watching her mother navigate those Beverly Hills mansions. She learned to observe, to study, to understand exactly how power worked and who really controlled it. So she endured. She documented. She outworked everyone around her by margins that couldn't be ignored. And most importantly, she saved every penny she could. 3 years into that job, she'd identified the fatal flaw in her company's biggest client relationship, a vulnerability that would cost them millions if left unchecked. When she presented the solution, her white male supervisor took credit and got a corner office promotion. That night, Sophia went home to her studio apartment and made a decision that would change everything. She was done making other people rich off her brilliance. Using her savings and a small business loan her mother co-signed with her house as collateral, Sophia launched Washington Tech Solutions from her dining room table. Her mother mortgaged the house she'd spent 20 years paying off. Everything they had was on the line. The first year nearly killed her. 18-hour days. Ramen noodles for dinner more nights than she could count. Rejection after rejection from potential clients who couldn't see past her age, her gender, her race to the revolutionary solutions she was offering. But Sophia had inherited more than her mother's work ethic. She had Rosa Washington's stubborn refusal to quit. The breakthrough came when she solved a cybersecurity crisis for a mid-sized financial firm in less than 24 hours, something their previous consultants had failed to fix in 3 months. Word spread through the industry like wildfire. Washington Tech Solutions grew from one woman with a laptop to 50 employees in 2 years. Then 200. Then 500. Sophia's proprietary algorithms were revolutionizing how companies protected their data. Her artificial intelligence applications were predicting market trends with unprecedented accuracy. By the time she turned 35, Dr. Sophia Washington, she'd earned her PhD in computer science while running her company, was the CEO of a tech empire worth over $2 billion. She'd done it without compromising her principles, without forgetting where she came from, and without owing anything to the old boy networks that had tried to keep her out. Her employees were diverse. Her leadership team was majority women and minorities. She paid fair wages, offered incredible benefits, and still managed to outperform every competitor in her space. The business world had to acknowledge her success, even if they couldn't understand how she'd achieved it. Which brought her to the attention of the Ashworth family. The Ashworths had been American aristocracy since before the Civil War. Their great-great-grandfather had made his fortune in railroads and steel. Their great-grandfather had survived the Depression by buying up desperate competitors for pennies on the dollar. Their grandfather had profited handsomely from World War II defense contracts. Now the current generation, led by patriarch Charles Ashworth III and his son Preston, controlled a financial empire worth over $50 billion. Banking, real estate, energy, media companies, political influence that reached the highest levels of government. But their empire was built on old money strategies in a new money world. They were hemorrhaging market share to tech companies they didn't understand. Their traditional investments were generating returns that couldn't compete with algorithm-driven trading. Their entire business model was becoming obsolete, and they knew it. They needed to modernize or die. More specifically, they needed Sophia Washington's technology and expertise to save them. The problem was their pride. Generations of inherited wealth had convinced them they were naturally superior to people who had to earn their success. The idea of needing help from anyone, especially a young black woman from South Central LA, was almost incomprehensible. But desperation has a way of overcoming even the deepest prejudices. Charles Ashworth III swallowed his pride and extended an invitation to their annual charity gala. The kind of exclusive event where America's power brokers gathered to see and be seen while writing tax-deductible checks to causes that made them feel better about their obscene wealth. For Sophia, receiving that invitation was validation 20 years in the making. These were the same people who'd looked through her mother like she was invisible. The same social circles that had excluded her despite her success. The same old money families who controlled industries she was revolutionizing. She'd finally forced them to acknowledge her power. What she didn't realize was that the invitation wasn't about respect. It was about desperation disguised as grudging acceptance. The Ashworths had no intention of treating her as an equal. They saw her as a problem to be managed, a useful tool to be acquired, a temporary necessity until they could figure out how to profit from her innovations without having to actually work with her. They were about to learn that Sophia Washington wasn't anyone's tool. The Ashworth estate sprawled across 300 acres of prime Hamptons real estate. The main house alone was 25,000 square feet of marble columns, crystal chandeliers, and imported Italian furniture that cost more than most people's homes. As Sophia's driver pulled through the wrought iron gates, she felt a familiar sensation. The same feeling she'd had as a child sitting in those Beverly Hills mansions while her mother worked. The sense of being surrounded by wealth and power that had been built on the backs of people like her family. But tonight was different. Tonight, she wasn't the cleaning lady's daughter watching from the margins. She was Dr. Sophia Washington, CEO of a billion-dollar empire, walking through those front doors as an equal. Or so she thought. The ballroom was a monument to excess. Hand-painted ceiling murals. Gold leaf detailing on every surface. A grand staircase that looked like something from a European palace. 500 of America's most powerful people mingled beneath crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than her mother's house. Sophia moved through the crowd with practiced confidence. She'd learned to navigate these spaces over the years. How to make small talk about vacation homes and charity boards. How to project power without seeming threatening. How to belong without forgetting who she was. The conversations followed predictable patterns. Polite interest in her company. Carefully worded compliments that managed to sound condescending. Questions about her background that were really attempts to confirm their assumptions about affirmative action and diversity hiring. She smiled. She networked. She played the game. But something felt different tonight. The glances lingered a little too long. The conversations felt more calculated than usual. She could sense undercurrents of tension she couldn't quite identify. Charles Ashworth III approached her near the champagne fountain. Tall, silver-haired, wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than her first car. The kind of man who'd never questioned his place in the world because generations of wealth had insulated him from doubt. "Dr. Washington," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "So wonderful you could join us tonight. You're quite the conversation piece." Conversation piece. Not contributor. Not peer. Piece. "Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Ashworth. Your foundation does important work." The words felt like glass in her mouth, but she'd learned when to pick her battles. "Indeed. Though I must say, I'm curious about something." He leaned closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "How exactly does someone like you build a company so quickly? It's quite remarkable. Someone like you." The three words carried the weight of centuries of assumptions about who belonged in rooms like this and who was just visiting. Before Sophia could respond, Preston Ashworth joined the conversation. Charles's son was everything she'd expected. Entitled, arrogant, blessed with mediocrity, but convinced of his own brilliance. The kind of man who'd inherited everything and earned nothing, but somehow believed he deserved both. "Father, you must introduce me to our guest of honor." Preston's smile was sharper than his father's, with an edge of cruelty that made Sophia's skin crawl. "Dr. Washington, isn't it? I've heard so much about your rapid rise to success." The pause before rapid rise was deliberate. So was the emphasis that made it sound almost scandalous. "Preston heads our technology acquisitions division," Charles explained. "He's been very interested in your company's innovations." "How flattering," Sophia replied, though every instinct was screaming warnings. Preston stepped closer, invading her personal space in a way that was clearly intentional. "You know, we've been wondering if you might be interested in a partnership. My family has resources you couldn't dream of. Connections that could take your little company to levels you've never imagined." Little company. $2 billion reduced to a cute side project. "I appreciate the interest, but Washington Tech Solutions isn't looking for partnerships at the moment." "Oh, I think you misunderstand." Preston's smile turned predatory. "We're not talking about a partnership. We're talking about acquisition. We buy your company, you get a nice payday, and everyone wins. I'm not interested in selling. Everyone has a price, Dr. Washington. Even someone like you." There it was again. Someone like you. And what kind of someone am I, exactly? The question hung in the air between them. Charles shifted uncomfortably, sensing the danger his son was walking into. But Preston was too arrogant to recognize the warning signs. "Well, you know, young, inexperienced, probably in over your head running something so complex. It would be a shame if you made mistakes that cost your investors money." The threat was barely veiled. Sophia felt her jaw tighten, but she kept her voice level. "I see. And I suppose your family would be better equipped to run my company. We have generations of experience managing large enterprises. We understand how business really works, how to navigate challenges that someone from your background might not anticipate. Your background. The euphemism hung between them like a loaded gun. My background. Preston glanced around, making sure their conversation wasn't being overheard. When he spoke again, his voice carried the casual cruelty of someone who'd never faced consequences for his words. Let's not pretend we don't all know how this works. Diversity initiatives. Government contracts set aside for minority-owned businesses. Tax advantages for companies run by women. You've had advantages that real entrepreneurs don't get. Real entrepreneurs. Sophia felt something cold settle in her chest. 20 years of building her empire. 20 years of outworking, outthinking, and outperforming everyone around her. 20 years of proving herself over and over again. And it all came down to this, the assumption that her success was a handout instead of something earned. I think there might be some confusion, she said quietly. My company succeeded because we built better products and provided better services than our competitors. The market doesn't care about diversity initiatives when it comes to results. Preston laughed, the sound sharp and ugly. Come now, Dr. Washington. We're all sophisticated people here. We understand how the game is played. You've been very clever about leveraging your unique position for maximum advantage. But that only works for so long. Charles touched his son's arm, a warning gesture. But Preston was drunk on his own sense of superiority. The thing is, markets change. Political winds shift. The advantages you've been enjoying might not last forever. It would be wise to take a good offer while it's available. And if I don't, Preston's smile turned arctic. Well, as I said, it would be a shame if inexperience led to costly mistakes. Markets can be unpredictable for companies that don't have the right kind of support. The threat was crystal clear now. Sell to us willingly, or we'll destroy your company and force you to sell for pennies on the dollar. Sophia looked at these two men, father and son, inheritors of wealth they'd never earned, wielding power they'd never deserved, and felt something break loose inside her chest. For 20 years, she'd played their game. She'd smiled at their condescension. She'd ignored their microaggressions. She'd worked twice as hard to get half the recognition. She'd code-switched and code-smiled and bent herself into shapes that would make them comfortable. She'd done it because she thought acceptance was the prize. She thought if she just proved herself thoroughly enough, completely enough, they'd eventually see her as an equal. But standing there, listening to Preston Ashworth reduce her life's work to affirmative action and government handouts, she finally understood the truth. They would never see her as an equal because they couldn't afford to. Their entire sense of self-worth depended on believing they were naturally superior. If someone like her could outperform them through merit alone, what did that say about their own accomplishments? So they would always find ways to diminish her success. Always find excuses to explain away her achievements. Always find reasons why she didn't really deserve what she'd earned. The realization was liberating and enraging in equal measure. You know what, Preston? Her voice was still quiet, but something in her tone made both men take a step back. You're absolutely right about one thing. Markets can be unpredictable, especially when they're disrupted by people you didn't see coming. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. With 3 quick taps, she canceled the acquisition proposal she'd been secretly preparing for months. The deal that would have made the Ashworth family $5 billion richer, while giving her access to their global networks. The deal she'd been planning to announce tonight. What are you doing? Charles asked, though his expression suggested he already knew. I'm withdrawing from negotiations for the partnership we've been discussing privately. The one your lawyers have been begging my lawyers to finalize. Preston's face went white. What negotiations? We just offered to buy your company. Oh, I'm sorry. Did your father not tell you about the real proposal? The one where Washington Tech Solutions was going to license our artificial intelligence platform to Ashworth Financial? The exclusive deal that would have revolutionized your entire investment strategy. Charles Ashworth III looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. The deal, Sophia continued, that would have generated $5 billion in additional revenue for your family over the next 3 years. The deal that would have saved your dying empire from technological obsolescence. Preston looked back and forth between his father and Sophia, confusion and growing panic warring on his face. But since you seem to think my success comes from handouts instead of innovation, I'm sure you'll find another solution. Maybe you can diversity initiative your way to the next technological breakthrough. She took a sip of champagne, savoring the moment. Oh, and Preston? You might want to check your portfolio in the morning. I hear several of your biggest tech investments are about to become very unprofitable. Something about their cybersecurity systems being vulnerable to the kind of attacks only my company knows how to prevent. You can't, Preston started. Can't what? Can't outcompete you? Can't outthink you? Can't succeed without your permission. Sophia's voice rose just enough to carry to the nearby conversations. I've been doing exactly that for 20 years. Charles grabbed his son's arm, trying to salvage the situation. Dr. Washington, I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding at all. Your son made your family's position very clear. You don't respect my achievements. You don't value my innovations. You certainly don't see me as an equal business partner. More people were turning to watch now. The kind of audience that could make or break reputations in this rarefied world. So let me make my position equally clear. Sophia set down her champagne glass with deliberate precision. Washington Tech Solutions will never do business with Ashworth Financial. Not now. Not ever. And I'll be making sure every other tech innovator knows exactly how your family treats potential partners who don't fit your traditional expectations. Preston, finally understanding the magnitude of what was happening, tried to backtrack. Look, I think we got off on the wrong foot. Wrong foot. Sophia's laugh was sharp as broken glass. You mean when you implied I built my company through affirmative action instead of merit? When you threatened to sabotage my business if I didn't sell to you? When you dismissed 20 years of innovation as luck and government handouts? The ballroom had gone quiet now. 500 of America's most powerful people were watching the Ashworth family's humiliation unfold in real time. That wasn't what I meant, Preston stammered. Then what did you mean? Please enlighten everyone here about what you really think of entrepreneurs who don't look like you. Preston opened his mouth, then closed it. There was no way out of the hole he'd dug. Charles tried one last time. Dr. Washington, surely we can discuss this privately. Privately? Like you've been privately telling your friends and competitors that my success couldn't possibly be legitimate? Like you've been privately undermining companies that threaten your market position? Sophia picked up a crystal wine glass from a nearby table. The same kind of glass her mother had washed in kitchens just like this one. You want to know what your little joke just cost you? And with that, she hurled the glass against the marble floor. The explosion of crystal silenced every conversation in the room. In the stunned quiet that followed, Sophia's voice carried to every corner of the ballroom. It cost you the future. The last shards of crystal were still skittering across the marble when Sophia turned on her heel. Her emerald gown rippled like a banner of war as she walked out of the ballroom, her back straight, her head high. The Ashworth men stood frozen, Charles pale with fury, Preston drowning in shame. Around them, whispers began to swirl like wildfire. She just walked away from $5 billion. Did you hear what she said about their empire? Washington Tech is about to change everything. Sophia didn't need to stay and watch their downfall begin. She knew she had already detonated the bomb. The true explosion would come tomorrow, when markets opened, when boardrooms whispered her name with a new mix of fear and respect, when the old guard realized their reign was crumbling. For the first time in her career, she hadn't just survived in their world. She had shattered it. What Sophia didn't know was that the Ashworths had no intention of surrendering quietly. That very night, behind closed doors, Charles made a call that would unleash the kind of ruthless retaliation only old money could buy. By morning, headlines would carry Sophia's name in ways she never imagined. Her empire would face its greatest threat yet. Not from failed innovation, but from the full, ugly force of a dynasty fighting for survival. And in that fight, the Ashworths were willing to burn everything to the ground.
Don't forget to subscribe to Black Nation to see how this young woman fights against a business structure that had long existed since decades.